Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Breakneck podcast of 2026. I'm Matt, and Ian is back for a new year. We got to figure out what this year is going to all be about. To start off the year, we're going to be retrospective on what it was like to be a founder working with AI in 2025, and what are the learnings. So why don't you kick it off? What was your year like? What did you learn?
Yeah, I've written 4 notes for myself. Let's see if we get to all of them. I think the biggest thing for me, having been in startup land for many, many years at this point, is I've never had a more welcoming market. And what I mean by that is we've all been through hype cycles. Not all of those hype cycles have lived up to the reality. And I'm not saying AI will live up to the full reality, but where it has kind of been welcoming, to reuse my term, is that the hype cycle has educated everybody from my mother down to the purchasing manager at some enterprise corporation. Not always correctly, but it has educated them in the sense of told them AI is this wonderful thing that can actually do anything. And so I've been in these customer conversations over the last 12 months where I've opened up, been ready to pitch, and, a sentence in, they go like, oh yeah, I know AI can do that. And it can do all of these other things. There are some downsides to it. And I think it'll probably go away in 2026. Almost definitely will go away in 2026. But it's been a revelation, and it's really forced me to rethink how to approach the market in this world where you have this kind of welcome mat laid out in front of you.
Certainly from a sales perspective, I think people are way more open to what AI and agents can do. And certainly by like the end of 2024 is when you and I started talking about agents extensively. We're like, oh, agents are obviously going to be this big thing. You start to go to conferences and everyone's talking about agents. People let you say you're going to do something that would have been absurd in 2023. You can say, well, we're going to just do this whole thing for you, or we're going to make AI that does this. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's just like taking on huge job functions, or even like, replacing whole teams of people with AI is now an open conversation.
Yeah. The second much bigger observation is I think we're entering the era, and you kind of touched on it, the era of just do it. What do I mean by that? We now have this amazing resource and energy available to us. And what it means is we can often brute force solutions to the challenges we have. And it's not applicable just to kind of the product world, the software product world, but let's use this as the example. We're used to, like, if you go all the way back to the lean startup, prior to that, you had waterfall approach. You're like, oh my God, that, this waterfall approach assumes this outcome, and you don't learn this stuff. So then we shift to this lean startup approach where you're constantly iterating, and you're like, oh my goodness, let's not spend all this time and effort to do something because we might get it wrong. Well, now the time and effort required to do something is much, much lower. And so often kind of a brute force failure repetition type of approach wins out over a kind of an intelligence, reasoning, kind of methodical, iterative approach. And it's causing us, or it will cause us, I think, to completely reimagine the way we do things. I think it's really applicable for design folks, for engineering folks, for product folks. Many of us in those roles are having this conversation over, like, I'm a designer, but maybe I can code, right? Or maybe I'm a product person. And I think it might have been Michael Kors was talking about, don't come to the table with an idea, come to the table with a prototype. And so on the surface, that's a small
and just
change.
as if you didn't catch our 2025 in review, Michael Kors just sold his company Duro in a great transaction for him. When we interviewed him earlier in the year, and it was like, yeah, we just completely rebuilt our platform. I'm like, that's a little bit dangerous. And then later that year, I mean, he had a really great outcome for Duro.
Yeah, we had Sean McCraner at a signer. He launched a new product line, which has been very, very successful. He had this fantastic example of Just Do It, where they opened up customer feedback. And rather than have a product manager or customer success manager sit there, look at the piece of feedback and, well, is this a good idea or not? I don't know. I mean, it'd be expensive to build. It could have this impact. They just had a straight pipeline to build that feature. And that's when the human in the loop came, right?
Yeah.
Much further down. It was like, well, just build it. See, does it work?
Yeah. And I think like in both their cases, they talked about, it's knowing that you are going to be building features in a day versus 2 months does, you have to make those big architectural changes. And so in both cases, they had to do big, bold, bet the farm on it. But I talked to one of his investors a month later after he released that new product, and he said it was just absolutely crushing. So we talked to him when he was launching, and he's like, I hope this goes well with good early feedback. And apparently it just unlocked massive revenue because it was much more functional and it was built to scale up for these kind of fast AI features.
Yeah, there's a great session from an Anthropic. It might be the head of design. She might have been the head of design at Anthropic. The title of the presentation, I think, was "Don't Trust the Process" is what it was. And her point was similar. That, in design land, you have this very methodical sort of, let's do research and demographics and test some prototypes and iterate your way through it. And you'll get there eventually. And she's like, no, I don't think that works anymore. Her message was almost to go back to kind of the Steve Jobs dictator type designer, which is, yeah, you can do all of that stuff, but that's just going to take forever. Who is the person with the most taste, right? The craftsman, dare I say it again, right? Who can shortcut through all of this and actually, because we can try it much quicker, get the person with the best taste and actually have them say, look, my intuition says this is the right answer. Build that and go and try it rather than do this slow, methodical process.
No, it's a real turnabout. Like, so some of the things in 2025 that we talked about are, I think for me, the inversion of product management advice in general is that, in 2015, if you had asked, I mean, I had a product management podcast back then where I interviewed Brett Taylor. I interviewed lots of if you invested in every one of my podcast guests, whether in their VC fund or in their startup, the day I interviewed them, you would have like the most insane returns possible. I mean, there's a few guys who probably drive most of it, but I can take that as a power law. And, if you'd asked somebody in 2015, these people who were very successful, you got to focus, you got to be disciplined. And then the second one was you just brought up, we got to have data. And, in 1999, you couldn't get data in the way. You didn't have that direct analytical feedback. But, after 2010 or so, you have big data. You have collecting data on every possible aspect of your business. And you could deliver features much, much faster. And now you can deliver features so fast that you can't actually have that customer feedback loop part. If you really want to be on the edge, you need to go back to what we had in the 90s, which is, you just guess at it. I'm sure there's some larger feedback loop that you need to incorporate, but you can't take like maybe the Google approach, which is you launch 50 different products and you wait to see how they evolve. And I think Google had to do a lot more. They brought back in the founder, and then we just need to make choices because we don't have long enough to make these data decision loops.
I'm going to call that Ian's just do it law. And then I'm going to counter it straight away with another one.
Great.
Which is born of another observation. Everybody knows this. The technology is moving unbelievably fast. So if you were to lean 100% into the just do it law, over-index on that, you're going to be in deep, deep shit, because what's going to happen is the technology that you're using to move as fast as possible will actually be out of date in some short period of time. Your just do it law doesn't get you there. So the flip side is, how do you actually not miss the next best thing in terms of the technology or the application? And you and I advocated for this in some of the work we did with some customers, which is you need to have a culture of learning, and not just kind of, oh, that's cool that somebody read this thing once. No, and our culture of learning that you and I made the decision to invest in this time last year is this podcast, right? You have to invest a significant amount of time, find the right way to do it. I don't know what it is. Again, Michael Core had some examples in his team. But you got to invest in learning. And I would argue, depending on where you are in kind of the life cycle of your product and your business, probably 25% of your time needs to be set aside to A, understand the new technologies that are out there, but B, form your own models of the world, which is what we're consistently doing with the podcast to, understand how this new technology applies, or this new application applies, and understand what it means for your business and what it means for your industry. So defining a culture of learning, I think, is amazingly important, even more so than it ever was before.
Yeah, it's scary because you want to work hard and you kind of like set yourself out to staying busy and doing as much as possible. And one of the things I experienced last month is one of our good friends, Massimo. He's starting a new company, so he's putting together all kinds of the company formation stuff. He's raising money and putting together financial forecasts and legal and stuff. And Massimo spent last summer becoming like AI native, right? Like really going native, like just, and when we were talking about slop, he was past us, and he has a very good approach on this. And he ran a course last summer about how to bring your children into AI.
Yeah, Curiosity Craft.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you ever take that course?
No,
Or?
I did. My kids are a bit older.
My kids, it was a perfect age, and so I had a lot of fun out of that. And I adopted a lot of the tools, and he showed me them. But it was the point of that course was, you can't look at the deficiency of AI and just say, well, AI sucks, and put your hands off. You need to jump in. And what came across is in a course that started out with the dangers of AI for your children and the dangers of AI for society in general, ended up with him investigating AI in a positive sense and playing with these tools and saying, how can we take the inevitable and somehow navigate that so that it doesn't cause our children to, I think what we see with the TikTok and stuff. I'm glad my children are only 4 because I don't have to give them to a phone. But if I had a 12 or 13-year-old right now who's addicted to TikTok or really having self, a lot of girls especially have very bad self-image and suicidal ideation and stuff like that because they're on these platforms all the time, very likely. And so you say, how do we engage with that so that doesn't happen to our children? Well, what ended up happening is he became so engaged with these tools that now he started another company in the construction space, an AI company. And I saw the output he had, and I judged it against the output I had right now. It's so much faster that it's like he put together a financial model. We had a discussion about financial model. He put it together in a day. It was better than what I had done in a month. And I'm pretty good at spreadsheets. It was so humbling. It's just like I'm essentially not working. I had the impression like this wave of anxiety come over me that I was essentially doing zero work compared to what was possible now watching a fast Massimo.
It's a fantastic way of visualizing it, because I think you and I did the same thing, right? We made a conscious decision to become AI native. And I literally took everything off my desk, and it happened for me December of 24. And that period of 6 months, I worked every single day for 6 months, essentially to become AI native. And then we got some traction, some understanding, and you have some solid foundation in terms of how you understand things. But I read an article this morning about a Claude Code plugin that popped out middle of 2025. And it's really compelling, and I missed it because I didn't do what I've just been advocating for, which is, you can do that first investment, become AI native, but you've got to maintain that. Right, you have to be consistently, and it's something that I've never had to do before. Every 4 years I switch industry because I like to learn, I think. And so I do that upfront investment and I learn about it, and that typically then I just top it up, by osmosis over time. Osmosis ain't gonna work anymore. We've got to find
it's
a
a
way to
totally different
continue.
time scale for education. The good news
Yep.
is these tools are extraordinarily easy to adopt.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think, one of the things I'm thinking now is that a big part of our offering is actually diffusing these technologies to our customers. Now we have a core data product, we have a core value proposition, but we sat down with a CEO and CRO of one of our companies yesterday, and we're like, we're going to show you how we're going to use Notebook LM, which is something we discussed on the podcast many times. And it felt funny because, I learned physics. I got a PhD in physics, right? So it took me 10 years between when I started as an undergrad and when I got my PhD, right? And I was, basically worked constantly as an experimental physicist, right? So I'm used to that level to become an expert. And I've been playing with Notebook LM nights and weekends. I called Massimo. I'm like, Massimo, how do you do that thing with Notebook LM? He explained it to me on the phone. I took notes. And then I brought it to the CR. They were just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then what they asked me at the end is like, when is this available in the product? And I was like, it's available now. Just go use it. But I think there's going to be a productized, like productized learning. Like, how do we create repeatable workflows for people to learn all of these new things? Because you should be able to apply to a subscription. Hey, you're like a founding CEO, you're an executive. This is your training program, because every month I got caught off sides with Notebook LM. I thought it was just a podcast, and I thought it was kind of dumb when Massimo showed it to me in June. So yeah, it's kind of dumb. I don't know. It's cool. Interesting. And then they all of a sudden release in September or October at some point in there, generating decks, and now it's completely changed the game.
So you've walked me up to the front door of my last learning and observation.
It's always nice when there's a kind of nice segue that emerges.
Here we go. So product used to be the most important thing in a startup. If you think about resources applied, it was like, I got to raise $2 million and $1 million to $1.5 million of that is just like for engineers. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll open the front door and clean the toilets. I'm the CEO. And, if we, a little bit further down the road, maybe we'll get a salesperson. That is not the case anymore. Relatively speaking, or comparatively speaking, the cost to develop product is going down significantly. And my first 3 points are really just all about that. So what does that mean for a startup if product is less important? It means the things you need to have in order to be successful are very different. So obviously a little bit of product. I think talent obviously has always been the case. Domain knowledge, I think, is even more important than it ever has been. Because if you and I how many ideas have we had on the podcast? Probably one per episode. That'd be fantastic. Have we had the ability?
Every episode goes about 10 minutes long, because about this point in the episode, maybe not this episode, we'll see, we both get fixated on something and we can't stop talking about it for another 20 minutes.
So, and we have the ability, we could by the end of the day have a prototype of that product. Great. What would we be missing? We would be missing the domain knowledge to really understand whether that's applicable. And I talked earlier about kind of from a design perspective, maybe intuition is great because you can fast forward to having the right UI or whatever it may be. So in order to get to market as quickly as possible with the right product, you actually need to have the domain knowledge and you need to have access to the market. And then the last piece of the puzzle is kind of the financial wherewithal. So product is way less important. Marketing, brand, communication, domain knowledge, the ability, the go-to-market aspect of it is way more important. And I think if I was to go back in time and start another business, I think I would probably look for a co-founder with the domain knowledge as opposed to the best CTO.
That's a really good point. I would say the distribution is really tricky here. And when you talk about domain knowledge, like having the domain knowledge to have interesting conversations with people that allow you to see how they could adopt what is essentially a finished technology. Right? You can have your forward deployed engineer or something like that. You can go shim it up, especially if you have a little financing, like you said. But it's very tricky. Not just distribution in terms, like we used to think about distribution of a product. You think about cold calling people and sending emails and stuff like that, and having a certain number of response rate. And I'm talking about once you talk with somebody, do you have the fluency in their world and understanding what's important in their world to actually identify and communicate how your AI is going to make an impact? And for us, I think that's really the game. And sometimes you realize that you can't talk about your technology. And so I'll start to segue into my points. The difficulty of distribution is finding what people are prepared to buy. And in the AI world, in 2025, one of the things I noticed was you really have to experiment with what people are going to purchase. You really, really have to experiment with it because you might have a technology. And then again, in our old product management, our pre-2020, say, oh, we got to be focused so we can give a very clear value prop for our product. And focus generally meant a smaller product, and we could sell it for $100 a month or $20 per user or whatever. And with AI can do a lot of that point stuff. I have a tool that can analyze this file, or I could drop it into Claude Code and, write up a little script and do the same thing, and I'll be done in 30 minutes. Why am I going to pay you? Right. And so then, well, I'm going to integrate many, many of these features like we talked about. You can integrate a lot of features. And at that point, now you have a much bigger product. And again, now you can't communicate. I have 50 different features. You have to say, hey, we're doing something transformational. We're doing something bigger. And our price point's going to be a lot higher. And we're going to go higher in the organization, right? And that was disorienting for me, is that, okay, I have this very particular solution, but you really have to think through what it enables. And you might have to do a lot of stuff that isn't particularly, related to the core technology, but is dependent on that AI change that's coming, and do the whole thing and to commit to the whole thing and have a much bigger offer.
Yeah, this is why it relates, at least in my head, to my point earlier about the just do it thing. We've been conditioned over the years to hyper focus. You're sitting in front of an investor. Yeah, I know you could do all of that, but what are you actually going to do? What are you going to focus on? And so when you're sitting in front of a customer and they're like, well, that stuff's easy now, so I need to do something bigger, grander than that. And you're like, oh shit, yeah, okay, all right, business outcomes. Oh yeah, actually we could do all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have that's me kind of echoing back in different words what you said, but I have a nuanced question for you. You said trying to work out what people are prepared to buy. What about ready to buy?
And that's exactly what I mean. When you go and do enterprise sales, and I'm basically talking about enterprise sales. If you're thinking about consumer, I don't know anything about that. I'm not talking about that. So don't infer that I'm talking about some big. Maybe it's important to consumer, maybe not. I have no idea. I like selling an enterprise, right? Or that's what I end up doing. And in that case, you need to align urgency, importance, budget cycle. All of these different things are going to line up, and they're going to line up in a buyer. And that buyer is not just going to be a buyer by themselves, but they're going to have other people, right? So let's say you get to a CTO and you have a product. There's a big difference between a product that the CTO has all of those different things, or urgency, priority, budget, all that stuff. ROI is all there. And the CTOs can just push a button and do it. And then another one where they have to go get buy-in from 6 different groups. And so it's like, those are all of the kind of Lego Tetris pieces that are always moving and configuring themselves. It's not quite obvious how you're going to navigate those, but you do need to remain engaged with that problem. Not like, what could AI do? AI could obviously do anything. Like, people are using AI every day to do incredible stuff, right? Like, the problem in most companies is that most of that value, like we talked about before, is benefiting the employee. And I say that I identify with the employee. I'm from the people, right? But if you're selling enterprise stuff, the company needs to derive that benefit. The employee should be working harder and doing more, and the company should be getting the upside. And what's happening now is, I'm an engineer, and I used to work 12 hours a day, and now I'm using Claude Code, and I can work 5 and then do my side project. And by the way, everybody, if you're running an engineering team, that's what's happening. And so you really do you have the mechanisms to incorporate AI in a way that changes your business? And that's, I think, kind of the reason you need to have these bigger offers, because if you have a small offer and it's deployed in particular, generally the employee will have less to do.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, yeah.
That's a very different world. So that's my number one. Point 2, I heard this advice the other day. We just got to have Massimo on the episode. As soon as Massimo's done raising money, we're going to have him on, because he told me, he's like, Fernando Flores told me, I'm just totally spilling the beans here. Fernando used to run a big consultancy. Fernando's a hero of mine, really cool guy, was a political prisoner after the coup in Argentina. He was a minister of the economy. He was in prison for 3 years. Milton Friedman got him out of prison and sent him to Stanford, the big consultancy. And he had this advice. He has lots and lots of advice. And what he said is, the role of a consultant is to stay 3 months ahead of everyone else, but not more. not less. 3 months. I think that is the best advice in 2026 that I learned in 2025 is I used to think in terms of, okay, we're going to spend the next 5 or 10 years building this company. Let me think 5 years ahead. Let me try to intercept reality with a viable company, obviously, that needs to remain funded over those 5 years so that 5 years from now, we're in the right place. And maybe that's what I've done, hopefully. But now it's stay exactly 3 months ahead of everybody else because you don't know what's going to get released. And also this problem of diffusion of knowledge and expertise or even awareness of what's possible means that if you're just 3 months ahead of everybody else at all times and you can get some momentum there,
Yeah.
It's a very powerful place to be. It's not nearly as deep as what I want. I want the physics. I want to like go and like explore a book for 3 years and become an expert and then like take back this knowledge. That's not the world we live in. It's 3 months.
I think that 3 months head start is even more valuable than it used to be because 3 months of kind of consuming, digesting, modeling in your own mind what the fuck is going on with AI is an enormous task, right? It used to be like, yeah, you just need to go in and use the right words and just be 3 months smarter than the customer, essentially. But being 3 months smarter than the customer now is even more valuable, I think is what I'm saying. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
I watch my friends get ahead of me and it drives me insane because it's just like, it really, it's disorienting. There's no way to stay 3 months ahead on everything, by the way. You're going to get 3 months ahead over here and you're going to realize halfway, you're going to get your ass kicked probably pretty frequently going forward. And you need to be prepared for that in terms of your financial modeling, in terms of your career progression, that if you're going to pick the wrong branch and staying 3 months ahead is a bit of a commitment. And you pick the wrong branch, you're committed to the wrong branch, you're stuck in a cul-de-sac and everyone's going to kick your ass and you're going to have to start from scratch again. But good news is all you have to do is work your way back to 3 months ahead. But yeah,
I love it. Simple.
I'm grappling with that. Last thing I'll say is in terms of raising money. I think right now it's easier than ever to go get revenue once you find it something that clicks. And it's hard to find something that clicks because you have to go and be 3 months ahead of somebody else and convince them that it's valuable. And that's tricky. I have a couple friends who are just geniuses. And if you pick the wrong branch, you committed to it and it just isn't there, okay, you're gonna have to start from scratch. So I think people need to be prepared to shut down companies that are not, it's like Gokul Rajaran said, check your boat. If it's a leaky boat, ask yourself if this is the boat you really want to continue bailing out of, or is this something new? Yeah. So raising money is hard all around. And I hear a lot of people struggling, companies that are raising that struggle much more. It's, we're certainly not in that 2021 era where it's like, they take your pulse and then give you a 3x multiple on your heart rate.
Yeah, it leans into a bigger question for me that I'm grappling with right now is what is the future of startups like in the next 2 to 3 years? It's on the, it's so easy to get started and it's actually so easy to get some revenue, but it's harder, I think, to raise money.
It's because here's the thing, the same difficult, how do you stay 3 months ahead of the VCs and also, articulate the opportunity you found, because it's not something where like in 2015, it's like, I'm Uber for this. I'm Uber for dog walking, raised $300 million with WAG from I was like, this it's just, it's X times Y equals Z. And then you raise money. And now it's like, you see people online trying to like articulate AI and they're referencing Dante. They're referencing medieval cosmology. It's like, we're committed at this company to wrestling demonic energy to power the next phase of enterprise. Like literally using kind of like spiritual language. I mean, like, go look at the shit that's getting funded, right? And it's like, it's very hard because of the complexity, because of the disorientation that we're experiencing, to communicate that well. It's very funny. I got somebody, You get somebody who say something like, "Well, we don't really have a thesis on this," and you're like, "What the fuck does that mean? We don't have a thesis on this." And then you meet somebody who's like, "I've been thinking about this nonstop for 6 months," and you're like, "Well, I'm the guy. Let's go."
Yeah.
So you really
Yeah.
have to play a lot of numbers. It's a different type of fundraising. I mean, fundraising is always hard in all eras, but um, it's a tricky beast to get people excited about something that clearly wasn't even possible 3 or 4 months ago, and they maybe never thought of it before in their life, and certainly their partners haven't, and so on. So that's a
Yeah.
entrepreneurial quirk now.
I'll offer an empathetic comment that I rarely do for venture capitalists. It's not a job that I would want right now. I don't know how in the world you would work out where to place your bets. I really don't.
Yeah, nasty. If I was a venture capitalist, I would just hang out with entrepreneurs all day and try to help them start companies. And when you see something hitting, just try to jam money into their companies. And I have friends that are doing that now too.
All right. Well, that was your last one?
That was my last one. I only had 3.
Okay.
So you did 4.
Right.
You win.
Well, let's begin to wrap things up. I did want to call out another very successful start, aka the Breakneck Podcast. I'm looking
Yes.
at a nice little visual here sent to us by Spotify. We are a 2025 instant hit show on Spotify. So, well done, Matt. Thanks for all the feedback
I
from
always
people
look at
and
the
all the
YouTube
listeners.
numbers, and I was very happy with our YouTube subscriber growth. And again,
Yeah,
this is a sideline for us. This is something
yeah,
that we use to stay current, and we figure, why don't we share it? So it was great to see the YouTube numbers, but Spotify also apparently did well for Spotify. We got to hit the Spotify algorithm at some point. Spotify needs a slop algorithm just like YouTube, because the YouTube Shorts were what crushed it for us on this year. It's like, every once in a while an episode would go viral, and we kind of know what the viral YouTube episodes are, what really performs on LinkedIn. But very nice to see
yeah.
Spotify
This is-
recognize us.
yeah, nice little pat on the back for us for something that we were doing when nobody was listening. So, anyway, that said, Matt, anything that caught your attention this week?
I signed up. They had my credit card already, but I re-signed up for the Anthropic Claude Pro again. It just felt like Anthropic, and I tried Grok for a little while. It's a weird little thing, and I had too many. I had Gemini, I had everything, and I was like, no, it's all the same. And so I was writing an essay this morning, and I've been trying writing in ChatGPT, and it sucks. And I tried a little writing experiment with Opus 4.5, which is the high level. And everyone's like, "Oh, this is a great writing tool." And I was very impressed with the Claude writing. And my team has been using Claude Code pretty aggressively and having good success. We do stuff where it's like, "Oh shit, we can't deploy to that client until we get that integration." Me and Julian hem and haw about how much we want to invest in it, and then like the next morning, someone's like, "Oh, it's done." It's like, "Oh, good, we don't have to worry about prioritization anymore. You just hand it to Claude Code, and it turns out there's a GraphQL thing, and it found it, and it integrated it, and it's done."
Well, I'll jump in with my thing that caught my attention, which is something called the Biodome, and it's kind of Claude related. So this entity called Auton Corp gave Claude access to a tomato seed in a pot in some sort of constrained environment with various sensors. And look it up here. I think the plant is 45 days old, and it is it's flourishing. We'll put it in the show notes, but it's kind of cool. It's Claude taking care of a plant and actually growing it, and it's just fun to look at, and it begins to speak to another use case actually that I think we're going to see, which is these kind of micro tasks that we're going to look to companies to do, very specific. Think a little bit like Replit and Lovable, but actually more sort of maybe more real world. Hey, can you do a better job of managing the heating in my house? I have nets, which are good, but I like the kitchen to be warmer than this room, and I sleep in that room. It needs to be cooler. And by the way, I'm never here at the weekend, so just turn everything off. Can you take care of that? And actually give me a bit of a website where I can just track everything.
Yeah, that's where it's failed so far. Like it's incredibly good at understanding text to some degree, but then makes gross errors. And the fact that it could keep a plant alive for 45 days is better than I do on most of the plants that I attempt to
Yeah, me
grow.
too.
My house is full of survivors. Anything that can't be killed is still alive, and so it's like, oh, I'm good at
Survival of the
plants. It's like
fittest.
you
I love
haven't
it.
seen the graveyard of my compost heap. Yeah, it's just like the Rick and Morty episode where he creates sentient life. There's this robot that has like a full intelligence, and he's like, "What's my purpose?" He's like, "Cut the butter." He's like, "Is that it?" And he's like, "Yes, that's all you do." And he's just becomes depressed. Um,
Yeah.
we need to talk to David Chen at some point too, which would be a great guess.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah, he'd be
good
another
friend
good guy to get on.
good
Yeah.
friend of ours.
Yeah.
You and Claire used to work with him. And he had been doing, I don't know what he's up to now, but he was doing robotic farming for a while, I remember. And I think robots are still very expensive is the problem. And if the software could get to the point where the robots can be much more robust with much simpler hardware, or we can get to the scale that the hardware, gets those cost reductions but
I want to get somebody of a robotic orientation or expertise on here. So if anybody knows anybody really, really deep in the robotic space, I think we actually do kind of know a couple of people.
and I will also point
in that
out
era.
our podcast, great financial results from our guests over the
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah. If
So
you got a startup in robotics, you need to get on here quickly. We can almost guarantee an exit this year.
that's true. I mean,
Almost.
past performance does indicate future results.
Yeah.
This,
There you go.
they always have that thing like, I am giving you investment advice is invest in companies that have been on our podcast.
All right. Well, let's leave it there before we get sued or something. All right, Matt, welcome to 2026.
Welcome. All right.
Let's
Happy
get
New
cracking.
Year.
All right. Bye-bye.